Morning everyone and happy Tuesday. The camera is a little bit different because I got a new phone just after my last live video, so if the lighting or angle is different, that's why. This camera is much better than my other one. But just in case you're wondering what's going on, today I'm here to talk about rabies. And September 28th is World Rabies Day, which is why I wanted to do it this month. Morning, Monica. And for those who don't know, rabies is most common in small mammals, so dogs, cats, raccoons, skunks, animals like that. It is a viral infection that is spread through saliva, so this includes being bitten or scratched. Sometimes if they've been had their feet in their mouth where they're cleaning something and then they scratch you, you can get it that way as well. It does pass to humans or from infected brain tissue. So if a raccoon's been hit by a car and you accidentally touch the brain tissue, pretty hard to accidentally touch it, but in that case it is possible that you could contract rabies. Essentially it affects the brain and the central nervous system, so there's a lot of really dangerous symptoms that come up. It's nearly always deadly. It's one of the only diseases that dogs and cats can get contracted from another being that is not curable. This is why we have titer tests and base vaccines to make sure that the animal is still protected against things like this. There are 50,000 deaths per year of humans that contract rabies. 50,000 a year. Especially if you live in areas that have a lot of wildlife or have a very high skunk or raccoon population, it may be a good idea to consider looking into getting a test of some kind to make sure that you do have coverage for that. Millions and millions of animals die every year from rabies, and a lot of times it is preventable. So the carriers include bats, raccoons, skunks, foxes, and cats. And the cats can be house cats that have gone outside, been bitten or scratched, and then come back. So do be wary if you do have an outdoor cat. Some of the more obvious symptoms include behavioral changes. So for example, if your dog or cat is usually really friendly to everybody and suddenly they become timid or aggressive, this is a good sign. Especially if they're usually one way and now they're the polar opposite. Thank you for the likes. Fever. Usually their body temperature will go up because it is an infection. If they're licking, biting, or chewing a specific spot on their body, this is likely where they were infected. So it's a good time to take them to the vet and get them looked at. There are secondary symptoms. Those are kind of the beginner symptoms. So if you notice those, many of those actually are related to other diseases and conditions. But if you notice that it progresses to photosensitivity, meaning they have difficulty being in the light and outside, they have a lack of appetite or strange eating habits. So if they used to, you put the bowl down, they eat the food, they're happy, and they walk away. Maybe they're suddenly guarding their food or moving their bowl somewhere else. Paralysis of the throat and jaw. So this is where the foaming comes from, because they actually have difficulty swallowing. So that they struggle to eat as well, which is why usually eating is affected. But the paralysis can also occur in their hind legs when they're having difficulty going upstairs, or we notice that they're dragging their hind legs a little bit. That could be another sign. Disorientation, staggering, weakness, or seizures. Seizures is a pretty big one because it does affect the brain and the central nervous system. But the incubation period for rabies is 2 to 8 weeks before you even notice symptoms. So if your animal does spend a lot of time outside, do keep an eye on them, especially In our area, actually, we had a family of skunks in the backyard, and I know that they can carry rabies, and one of them actually charged Kaya. When she was out to pee, I was out there with her because the skunks freaked her out a couple days before, so now I take her out at night, and skunks aren't usually aggressive in that way. They usually will leave you alone if you leave them alone. So for it to charge made me really nervous. So naturally I brought Kai back inside, and the skunk has been relocated a short distance, but I saw it again on Saturday, and it's making me nervous. Right now there's no accurate diagnostic test to say yes, your animal has rabies, or no, it doesn't. Most practitioners look for the obvious signs of foaming at the mouth or other neurological symptoms. They'll look for the infection site to see if they can find where they were bitten or scratched. There is no cure. So if your dog doesn't have his very first, or dog or cat doesn't have their very first rabies vaccine, it is mandatory in most places. In Ontario, it's every 3 years. They have to have it. If there is actually a titer test for rabies, which I found out recently, and you have the option of the titer test, but you have to know that not all businesses accept the titer test, meaning if you want to board them at a certain place, or have someone come in and watch your animal, many of them will not do it if you do not have proof of vaccine for rabies, because it is incurable. And they give you a little rabies tag. It's usually about this big. It goes on your pet's collar to prove that they have their rabies vaccine. So there is the titer option, but just so you know, there are both. But I'm a little nervous about rabies just because the last time Kaya had her shot 3 years ago, she was sick for 3 days afterwards. And I know it's better for her to be sick for 3 days than to die from the viral infection. But considering doing the titer test in October to see how it goes, most of her other vaccines far exceed the limit on the titer test where they need to be revaccinated. So she is getting those titer tests again, but just so you know, it is the only incurable one, so do take it fairly seriously. Even if you don't worry too much about the other ones, rabies is really important. In our area, because we live, well, where I am right now, I'm in southern Ontario, so we're in just south of cottage country, and there are a lot of bats, raccoons, skunks, and foxes up there. So just something to keep in mind. The last rabies outbreak was actually from animals that had migrated up from the northern states. So especially if you live in like far southern Ontario or border the United States, even in Manitoba and Alberta, do be careful of that. Rabies, as far as I know, does not affect horses. There are many other diseases that horses can get from infectious mammals, but rabies is not one of them. I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day, and I will see you next Tuesday.